Hello, folks. This is the Woke Centrist coming at you again with Wick Mick hot takes. And we're going to discuss the other video that Kyle came out with regarding his interview with Jordan Peterson. So, this particular one, he digs into Peterson's Twitter ban. If you want to check out a previous video where I talked about his ban and did a hot take on his video that Jordan Peterson made after he got banned from Twitter. I'll see if I can include that link below so that you can check it out. But let me go ahead and start things off here, and let's get it going.
So I noticed just the other day.
And of course, I was woefully unprepared. So what happened is I forgot to put in my headphones. Oh, man. All right, let's try this again.
So I noticed just the other day you were banned from Twitter. Now, I'm somebody, nobody can argue against my lefty credentials. Everybody knows I'm a man of the left. Having said that, my solution on this issue of social media censorship has always been, look, we need to expand First Amendment protections. And the way you do that is to regulate these big social media companies like their public utilities. So if you do that, then basically you're saying this is the new public square and people can speak their mind here. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, you can't,
Well, here's what I say. If Twitter is the new public square, our public square is a goddamn cesspool. I don't know. I don't know what you want to do about Twitter. It's not like everybody's up on Twitter. I rarely use Twitter, but I don't know. I think broad regulation regarding social media groups, I know it's very hard to say since these are publicly traded companies, but let's hear what Kyle has to say further about that.
Dox people or do direct threats of violence or anything that's actually illegal will remain illegal. But outside of that, you can't censor people just based on political opinion. So, I definitely wouldn't have banned you, suspended you, etc. But I do have a question about that specific tweet that did get you in trouble because, you said something to the effect of,
well, I don't know if it got me in trouble. I don't think I'm in trouble. Twitter banned me, but I don't consider that trouble.
That's fair enough. Fair.
Yeah, since like Peterson started to go into semantics here, Peterson is in trouble with Twitter, maybe, but here we go.
Point. But you said something to the effect of, remember when pride was a sin and the criminal physician.
And Ellen Page just had her breasts cut off by a criminal physician.
Exactly. So my question is the physician really criminal? If you agree that adults can decide to transition, then why would the physician be criminal? Don't adults have that right if they want to transition?
Not everything legal isn't criminal. And do they have that right? See, I would have left Ellen Page alone if she hadn't been parading her new abs in a fashion magazine.
What does that have to do with anything at all? That is his motive. She showed her abs or his abs and he got offended by that. Is that what is going on here?
How many kids do you think she can convince to convert? One?
Yeah.
See, this is like, I don't know, convinced to convert to what? To being trans? Is this like the same type of argument where you have a prominent gay celebrity and because they're a public person, are they convincing people to convert to homosexuality? Like, I don't quite get Peterson's argument here.
1,000? No, not
See,
yeah.
No,
really?
I want to respond to that. I think that with the trans community, it's very similar to the gay community, where back when that first became a big issue, people thought, oh, if we talk about it, if it's in magazines or whatever, we're promoting kids to go down that path. But really what happened is people are who they are. And if they're gay, they just decided to be like, yeah, I'm gay. And they were just more open and honest with themselves. So I don't think you're promoting people to do that.
No,
You're
that's
just
not
saying,
what happened.
if you
You're
are that, it's okay.
wrong.
Okay. Well,
You're utterly
I'm
wrong.
listening.
There's
I'm
nothing
listening.
about that that's right.
So explain.
Well, there's been an absolute look. One of the reasons that I opposed Bill C-16 in Canada to begin with, this pronoun compelled speech bill, was because I knew perfectly well what was going to happen when we introduced confusion about gender identity into the public sphere. Now, the argument was that if we left people with gender dysphoria alone to make their own way and stop torturing them, that we would decrease the mental health load on those individuals. And my analysis as a clinician was that for every one person of that sort that we hypothetically save, we doom 1,000 more as a consequence of confusion and social contagion. I knew the literature on psychogenic epidemics. They used to call that mass hysteria, and it's a literature that goes back about 300 years.
So why is he relying on 300-year-old literature? I'm pretty sure that scientifically we have progressed quite a bit from 300 years ago. I don't know. This just doesn't make any sense. It's like me going into 300-year-old genetic science and saying, hey, phrenology is real. Let's take a look at eugenics. It's like, come on. Why do you use current science to determine whether this stuff is true, not some stuff that was brought up 300 years ago?
And when you introduce social confusion, you can produce a psychogenic epidemic, especially among, generally it's adolescent females who are most susceptible to it. So I thought, oh, well, what's going to happen is we'll produce a psychogenic epidemic of gender dysphoria among adolescent females. And that is exactly what's happened. And it isn't the fact that we've freed up people who are in doubt about their identity to be who they are. That may have happened in a tiny minority of cases. It's absolutely and definitely the case that we've doomed thousands of kids to brutal, mutilating surgery and premature sterility.
Well, not all the people who are trans actually get that surgery. I don't know what the percentage is, but I don't think the percentage is extremely high. And when we talk about the surgery, I think talking about gender reassignment surgery that involves, the genitals. As far as like breast augmentation and things like that go, that's non-trans surgery, normal. It happens normally. So I don't know what his opinion is on that.
And we've done that on the altar of our hypothetical moral virtue and compassion. Look, I read a corporate analysis of the trans surgery industry last week. Growth rate projection for you lefty types and your anti-corporatism. Growth rate projection, 15% per year. Invest now, a $350 million business as of 2022, projected to expand to $750 million by 2027.
Did you say 750 million? So how much is like a trans surgery? Like $50,000, give or take? Like the amounts that he's speaking about sound high, but in the context of the American medical system, 750 million is a drop in the bucket. Like that doesn't even cover the costs of a hospital for like a couple months. I don't know what this guy's talking about.
No moral hazard there. There's plenty of moral hazard there. And that surgery is absolutely brutal.
So what percentage of the population do you think in your conception of how this is unfolding, what percentage of the population do you think is going to end up being trans at the end of this? Do you think like
It
one day it's
depends on how
going
you
to be like
define it.
70% of the
We know
country
already
is trans?
we know already that about 1 in 5 adolescents now identifies, to use that hated word, identifies as part of the hypothetical LGBTQ plus community.
Hated word. It's just an acronym, man. Um, so, okay. So he's saying 1 in 5 people are going to be part of this community, which is a pretty broad ass spectrum. But it sounds like Kyle's question was particularly about trans people. He's kind of dodged the question by broadening the scope, which is definitely a straw man tactic, but I'll let him go ahead here.
So it's 1 in 5. I don't know what the upper limit is. There's a consulting group in the UK now that's claiming there's 150 different genders. There's actually, I suppose, 7 billion different genders if you want to get technical about it, because everybody's temperament differs. But I don't know what the upper limit is. And I have no idea what the upper limit is for this surgical intervention. We'll see. But I don't find it, I don't find it the least bit acceptable. And if you think that your compassion is demanding,
he doesn't find it acceptable about what other people do in regards to trans surgery. Now, when we're talking about this stuff, does he make the same exceptions for those who pursue plastic surgery for improvement in without any type of transition? Like we're talking about breast augmentation, ass augmentation, et cetera, any number of cosmetic surgeries that people get. What a transition surgery, is that considered cosmetic? I would think so.
that you extend your pity to the LGBTQ plus community at the cost of sterilizing children, you should think again. You're on the wrong side of this, and not in a trivial way.
I would appreciate if you don't ascribe beliefs to me that I don't have. Remember, my original question was
well,
about,
you said earlier in this question that,
I said
that you
Elliot
were,
Page is an adult, and so do you think that he has the right to
yeah,
transition?
but
that was the original
you made
question.
some comments after that. Yeah, but as a star
Mhm.
and a public figure and a model for emulation,
Mhm.
she also has the responsibility not to entice confused adolescents into a catastrophic decision before they have the maturity to make that decision.
I just have to say, Jordan, I think it's a little bit of a moral panic. I just don't see some sort of, frenzy of
Okay,
people
what would you
running
consider-
to become trans.
Yeah, I don't see this frenzy either. I think it's quite authoritarian to say that someone has to shape their behavior based off of what type of role model they might be. Maybe he doesn't want to be a role model. Is that his fault? And what type of is Elliot Page telling people, hey, go get trans surgery? Maybe he's just saying that's what it works for him. And what about Jordan, when he was taking his benzos and stuff, does he look at it the same way with his problems? So I don't know.
First of all, that's a hell of a way to put it.
What?
Why don't you take a look at the increases in surgical interventions and see what you think? I mean, how many do you think is too many? How
Again,
many? Wait, look,
None is too many. The people are allowed to decide what they want to do with their own bodies, especially adults. Like Kim Kardashian. She looks like a pretty plastic surgeryed up person. Does Jordan have the same critique about her? Cutting her body up and being a role model in that way. I've not seen at any one time Jordan Peterson making any of these types of critiques. I could be wrong, and they might be out there somewhere, but I've never seen it so far. And I would like to think that those type of cosmetic surgeries are far more prevalent than gender affirming surgeries or whatever you want to call it. So if a woman is flat chested and she gets, an augmentation for some breasts, would that be called a gender affirmation? Like, she has like a manly chest, and I'm talking like not a trans woman, just a woman that is not well endowed. Is she not allowed to affirm her gender by getting some big old knockers? I don't know.
If we're talking about
I'll answer your
suffering-
question. I'll answer your question. The argument is it used to be very repressed because that's very outside of the tradition and the norm and the standard. And that now when you sort of let the boot off the neck a little bit.
Suppressed? What used to be suppressed?
The entire LGBTQ community. I mean, it was very recently we even got gay marriage in the United States.
First of all, they're not a community.
Well, you understand the point I'm
community?
making.
No,
He's starting to get weird and semantical in these arguments. I don't know. I feel like when Jordan Peterson doesn't have a good comeback, he latches on to words and gets really autistic about it. Like in this case, when we're talking about the word community, like what is a community? It's basically just a group of people. Are these people not a group of people? Like what type of people show up at a pride events? What do you want to call them?
No, actually, neither I understand it nor you, and that's why we're delving into it. First of all, they're not a community. That's just a catchphrase. It's a buzzword. And I'll tell you something else, that almost all the kids who are undergoing surgical intervention, the clinical literature is absolutely clear on this. 80% of kids with gender dysphoria identify as homosexual when they mature. 80%. And that means the vast majority of people who are being converted surgically are gay. Now, how is that an advantage to the gay community?
All right, so one of the things he didn't mention is he said when they mature, what age would that be? And from what I understand, a lot of these gender affirming surgeries do not occur before these people are adults. I think they have to wait at least until they're much more mature before they can conduct in these surgeries. And it's not like they're able to do these on a whim. I believe they have to get many consultations beforehand. But yeah, let's continue.
Community, precisely.
No, see, I'm not taking a position in any way, shape, or form on the kids because I don't know the first thing about this to comment on the kids. Well, but see, that's why we're having this conversation, though, is because my original question was about
kids.
The adults and what your take is on the adults. And it sounds to me like, let me ask you guys, would you ban transition surgery for adults?
I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Question.
We're paying a big price for it, and I think that it was an act of stunning hubris to conduct the first trans surgery procedure. And it's not obvious to me at all that it's been a net social good. And
but
so,
aren't there some people that are obviously trans who were born in one body, they feel like they're in the other body, and when they're an adult, they can make the decision? And then even from just a freedom and liberty perspective, shouldn't they have that right? Even if they do it and then they regret it, shouldn't they have the right to try it?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a tricky one, right? Because there's all sorts of surgical enhancement procedures that are it's not obviously appropriate to make them illegal. And I don't know exactly where the cutoff line is, so to speak. And that's partly why we're having a public discussion about it. But this entire argument, in many ways, is stated so idiotically that it almost defies description. I mean, what do you mean feel like you're in the wrong body.
Well,
What kind of measurement is that? Now, hang on a second.
I was going to
There
answer.
are rules for these sorts of diagnostic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The rule is that you have to make a valid and reliable diagnosis. That's if you're diagnosing depression or anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder or cancer.
Well, here's what when someone goes to see a therapist, aren't many of the issues that they have based off of feelings. Like when you go in, you feel sad, you feel depressed. Aren't these valid ways to express something you feel that is wrong with you? Don't you have to first start that conversation? Like when I go to the doctor, I say, I feel a pain here, or I feel hot. Then they go and they make an assessment, perhaps by using tools. I know it's more difficult when what is in psychology, it's just a bunch of questions and you check some DSM manual to see what lines up with the answered questions, but it does start with feeling. I don't understand why Jordan is objecting to that in particular.
Cancer or anything like that. There are standards that you have to abide by in order to make a diagnosis, in order to fulfill the obligations of your professional college. If someone comes to you and says, I feel like I have lung cancer, that is not sufficient grounds upon which to formulate a diagnosis.
Yeah, nobody comes in. Well, I can't say nobody. There are probably some pretty crazy people, but someone might say, I feel like I have some breathing difficulty. They don't come to the conclusion of what that might be. So if someone feels like they're in the wrong gendered body, is that automatically gender dysphoria? Is there a scale to that? I don't know.
Much less proceed to surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, what do you mean by feel? What is that? Is that an emotion? Is it a motivation? Is it a philosophical conclusion? What is it?
Let me explain to you what I mean. So I've been doing my show for about a decade, and about 2 or 3 years into doing my show, there were, some stories here and there that I covered about the trans issue. Somebody who is trans reached out to me and explained to me in a very straightforward way, yeah, look, I was born biologically female. I feel like I'm biologically male. My reality
what does that
never
mean?
lined up. Well,
Feel.
I'm just explaining what they said, and then you can respond however you'd like to respond. And they told me as soon as I got the surgery, changed the way I dressed, changed the way I appeared, I felt phenomenally better. And so that's why, at least for me, this was the answer. Now, I think it would be incredibly arrogant for me to say back to that person, no, you shouldn't do that, or I know better than you do for yourself. And that's not to say that every time somebody does this, it works out well, of course, because everybody's an individual. But in some instances, that's the answer. So, me as a simple outsider, I just look at it and say, hey, whatever floats your boat, and if it works, it works.
Look, most of the time, my attitude is you can go to hell in handbasket any way you choose if you're an adult. Now, this problem is complicated and compounded by the fact of the necessity of medical involvement and the ethics on the medical front. So when you asked me about how that should be regulated, my answer was I'm not exactly sure about that.
Yeah,
although it isn't obvious to me that it's obvious to me that the trans surgery enterprise has gone way too far, thousands of people too far. And I'm certain that it's harmed exponentially more people than it's helped.
All right, guys, what you just saw was a teaser clip from my podcast with Dr. Jordan Peterson.
All right, so I'll stop it there. Does seem that Jordan is pretty adamant. One of the things I wish he did is provide perhaps some reference studies or statistics regarding these. So far, we're just going off of the word of what he says. And I don't know. If he's trustworthy on that front. I know Kyle is quite wonky, and typically when you follow up with the statistics that he provides, they're they're pretty accurate. I know there wasn't a whole lot of statistics being thrown out here. I know one of them was 1 in 5 people are going to become trans. That's wholly unbelievable. Um, I don't know where he gets that stat from, but there's no way that 20% of all people are going to become trans one day. It just sounds completely ridiculous. Uh, but anyway, in this section, yeah, Peterson seems to be working a lot off of emotion. He gets really fired up in these questions. I thought he was not being very charitable with Kyle. I know there were a couple moments where he was like, "No, you're completely wrong," and it's like, man, let the guy talk, at least finish his point, and then you can respond. And he keeps jumping on the bait like it's red meat. I know Kyle was like, "Well, this isn't my position. I'm just telling you what they told me." So I don't know. It looks like Peterson is not really open to open-minded discussion. Like, I know he was sitting there thinking for 5 seconds whether they should ban um, transition surgery for adults. And what transition surgery is not just a sex change when it comes to um, the genitals. It could be breasts augmentation and reduction, other body shaping techniques that are not even related to the genitals. And a lot of times, I don't think these trans people completely um, go through the complete transformation of a full transition surgery in the first place. So I think he's kind of lacking, at least both of them, in being able to get down to those types of details, which I think are actually really important. But anyway, thank you very much for checking out my videos. I'll try to put a link in the description so that you can check out my hot take on Jordan Peterson's Twitter banned response. But thank you. Please like and subscribe, share my stuff everywhere that you can, and make sure you don't woke out too much. Woke Centris out. Bye-bye.